There's something very exciting happening in the UK this year. No, it isn't the Queen's 90th birthday celebrations, and no, it isn't because we're really excited about the England football team's chances in Euro 2016. What it is the EU referendum, which is commonly referred to as Brexit, where we in the UK finally get our say on whether we want to stay part of the European Union or choose another course. Now, as someone who studied economics and is very interested in politics, I've been keenly following this for many, many years, so it's a very exciting event for me that is finally happening. But I also, as you know, if you've watched any of my blogs, I also do astrology, and so I was keen to know what astrology had to say about Brexit. Now, with politics and astrology, it's not always that simple to detect trends and how things might pan out. But I can give you all one example of when astrology was very accurate indeed. For example, last year we had a general election in the United Kingdom in May 2015, and prior to the election, all the polls had Labour either ahead or neck and neck, and all the predictions were saying that it would either be a Labour majority or the Conservatives wouldn't be able to form a government and they'd have to go into either coalition again with more than just the Liberal Democrats because they would perform rather weakly. So I was very interested, so I thought, oh well, I'll have a look and see what the charts have to say. So I drew out the charts of David Cameron, Ed Miliband, Nick Clegg and Nigel Farage, and as soon as I looked at David Cameron's chart I thought, wow, he is smashing this. So I immediately thought to myself, the Conservatives are going to perform way better than all these scientific polls are saying. And I was right, because the Conservatives got an overall majority, they didn't need to go into coalition, and they were able to form a government. Conversely, I looked at Ed Miliband's chart and I was thinking, oh dear, this does not look serendipitous for him, and he resigned. No, he didn't resign the day after I did my prediction, he resigned the day after the election, and his party performed not particularly well at all. Nick Clegg, ouch, his party was nearly wiped out, so his chart didn't look particularly good either. And I looked at Nigel Farage's chart, and his was rather mixed, because there were good and bad elements, and as it turned out, his party, UKIP, got 3.8 million votes, but only managed to get one seat in the House of Commons. Well, if you're wondering how that can happen, welcome to the first past the post system that we have in the UK. But anyway, I found that the astrology was really revealing in terms of our previous election, so I'm quite interested now to see what astrology has to say about Brexit. So I have looked online and I see there are other astrologers who are making quite a lot of the fact that the actual referendum takes place on June the 23rd and that Uranus is at 23 degrees of Aries, because they say the whole 23-degree thing has been quite relevant in UK history. But I'm not going to take this approach at all. I'm going to stick to the methods that work for me, and that's two things: transits and solar arc progressions. Now, extremely briefly, because, you know, you guys out there don't know the technicalities of astrology, so transits is where the actual physical planets are now with respect to the Earth, so that would be particularly the slower moving planets like Pluto, Uranus, Neptune and Saturn, and the solar arc directions are more about a symbolic movement of planets, and I found them quite powerful in predicting trends. So, let's get to it. The United Kingdom chart, which I've got a picture of here, I know it's really hard to see on the screen, it might come out a little bit small, but like people, countries have charts, they have dates of birth. And in the case of the United Kingdom, the date of birth is the 1st of January 1801, Westminster. And so that chart is based on that particular date. And the UK is a Capricorn, it has Libra rising, it has the moon in Cancer, and it has its midheaven in Cancer. So there's a very strong cardinal sign influence going on in the UK chart. And I'm really interested to observe that most of the UK Prime Ministers have come from the cardinal signs. So at the moment we've got David Cameron, who's Libra, Maggie Thatcher was Libra. In the last general election, all the contenders were from the cardinal signs. David Cameron, Libra, Ed Miliband and Nick Clegg are both Capricorn, Nigel Farage is Aries, and in Scotland Nicola Sturgeon is Cancer. So I think the message is that if you've got designs on being the UK President, or Prime Minister should I say, it really helps if you're from a cardinal sign. And also James Callaghan is Aries, Edward Heath Cancer, Douglas Home Cancer, Clement Attlee was Capricorn. So there you go. And if you think about it, Boris Johnson, I did have a little look at his chart. He's Gemini, but his chart's not really looking good for the leadership. But keep your eye on Theresa May, because she's another Libran, so I think she may be in there as a future leader of the UK. But enough about that. Where is the planet Pluto at the moment? When you're thinking of change, which the EU referendum would result in a lot of changes, it's quite a jolt. We have all these people with scare stories saying how it will affect not only the UK but the world economy. So when you look at things that are so potentially tumultuous or important events, we look for the involvement of the planet Pluto. And right now, Pluto is in Capricorn, and it's in the 4th house of the United Kingdom. That's transiting Pluto. And why that is important is when we think of Pluto in the 4th house, we think of family breakup. And if anyone's following UK politics, they'll know that Scotland are quite eager for their independence. So that even though they voted no 2 years ago, if the United Kingdom vote as a whole to leave the EU, it's highly likely that Scotland are going to want to break away because they're quite keen on staying in the EU, whereas England and Wales tend to be the more Eurosceptic countries. So the fact that Pluto's in the 4th house, to me, indicates that we're going to carry on seeing rumblings of breakup within the UK, which indicates to me that we might be edging towards Brexit. So it's just one indicator. The next thing is Uranus, which is also a planet with change, kind of turmoiled events, lots of renegotiations. That's in Aries, which is in the 7th house, which is the house of partnership. Again, partnerships with other countries, treaties, and sort of agreements we have with other countries. So the fact that Uranus is there indicates a change up in our relationships with our trading partners and with the countries we have treaties with. And it's there for quite a few more years, indicating, as we know, the negotiations would have to carry on for quite some time before, the whole Brexit thing is resolved if we do vote out. But the most interesting thing that I'm coming to now is I had a look at where the solar arc Pluto is, and it lands up, travels around the chart, that's it here, lands up right on the ascendant. Now when you're looking at a chart to see if there's going to be, whether it's a personal chart or a chart of a country, you want to see whether the main elements of the chart are affected, like the ascendant, which is here, the midheaven up there, the sun or the moon. And then you would look to see what planet is affecting it. Now, the ascendant is a very important trigger point in all charts. So the fact that Pluto is right on the ascendant says to me this is an extremely important time in the history of the United Kingdom. Pluto is the planet symbolic with change, with quite radical change. The ascendant is symbolic of something new. So both those things are saying to me that, wow, this is quite important. This is not a trivial event. But I want to look back in the UK's history and see how active solar arc Pluto was. Is it a good indicator of things that go on in the UK? So Pluto begins its journey over here. Where is it? And it moves in 1886. Solar arc Pluto is on the descendant, right opposite the ascendant, and therefore another important part of the chart. And what's happening around then? It's just before the beginning of the reign of Queen Victoria. Now this was a hugely significant time in British history. It's when it became, rule Britannia. Britannia rules the waves. It was colonialism, the time when Britain became the British Empire. I've been told that had Queen Victoria been in power prior to that, the United Kingdom might have not lost kind of the Civil War and America would have stayed a colony. That's how powerful her effect was. So you look at that and you think Pluto at the beginning of Queen Victoria's reign, wow, that was a powerful bit of symbolism in UK history. Then we move on. The next major trigger point for solar arc Pluto is when it gets to the top of the chart at the midheaven. That's in 1930, and that's the time of the Great Depression, the time the British Empire was on the decline, and time of beginning of a very, very tumultuous and difficult time in British history, going through World War II, the slow rebuilding after all the debt of World War II. So again, Pluto marking a big turning point in British history. And now where is Pluto? On the ascendant. That's solar arc Pluto. But I look back again and I think, what was happening the last time the UK had a referendum on Europe? Now this was in 1976. And the referendum was then framed as, do we want to be part of the EEC, the European Economic Community? And I absolutely really gobsmacked to see that transiting Pluto is right on the ascendant during the 1975, it is 75, referendum. I think, wow, how symbolic is that? Here, both times we have a referendum on Europe, Pluto is on the ascendant. In one case, the transiting Pluto, in one case, the solar arc. So, I'm not... In 1975, the vote was to join the EEC, and I think that kind of put the UK on this whole juggernaut of being involved in Europe, that we were heading towards what we didn't realise then is ever closer economic, political and social union. So it did represent a big changing point in United Kingdom history in terms of releasing some of our sovereignty to be part of this trading bloc, which really wasn't. It was going to be a political and social bloc. Now Pluto's on the ascendant, we have again a chance to change our destiny. This time, I think the greater change is represented by coming out rather than staying in. So to me, that's a pretty strong indicator that we might be heading out. Okay, since the UK chart, it's just a fantastic chart for a country. It's the gift that keeps on giving, because there's so much powerful symbolism in there. I just thought I might mention that when Neptune was on the ascendant, that was in 1946, and it hovered around there for those years. That was when the NHS was set up. And Neptune is symbolic of hospitals, medicine, pharmaceuticals, nursing, caring. The planet associated with all those things happens to be on the UK's ascendant at the exact time the NHS is formed, something this country is incredibly proud of. So there again, some fantastic symbolism which says to me that this chart cannot be ignored. We look back over the past and we see that it is predicting stuff with quite a lot of accuracy. I've got some other symbols written here which are quite interesting to explore, not quite as interesting as my discussion about Pluto, but they're all part of it. Now what I've got there is solar arc Mars, so that's the symbolic progression of Mars through the chart. It is right on Mercury in the third house. That to me indicates a great upping in the tempo of negotiations. Third house is all about negotiations, contracts, deals. Mercury is also about those subjects, trade, deals. Mars speeds everything up, gets a lot of frenetic activity. That says to me that we also might be coming out, hence the huge pickup in impetus towards new trade deals, new negotiations. Okay, we've also got the solar arc ascendant, which is the movement of the ascendant through the chart. That is linking up to Mars in Taurus in the 8th house. Now Taurus in Mars, very stubborn. And I think there is a kind of stubbornness amongst the British people where we're saying, don't you Obama come and tell us what we should be doing. Don't anyone, Christine Lagarde, whoever you are, don't tell us what we should be doing. We can make up our own mind because we have our own intuition. And that kind of stubborn, don't tell me what to do mentality within Britain is really being aroused right now. Added to the fact, Mars in the chart of the United Kingdom is in the 8th house. Again, the house associated with change, with divorce, with breakdown in old contracts, old agreements. And so for Mars in the 8th house to be activated, again for me, it's saying this whole theme of change, of something new, of a life-death kind of transformative struggle where something old is dying, something new is being reborn. Not necessarily something easy, so we're not expecting a kind of quick cut cesarean here. It's more of a long labour Brexit, but at the end of it, the rebirth of something new. Okay. We've also got the solar arc moon is down here and it's opposing Saturn. Saturn for the United Kingdom is in the 11th house. Saturn is a planet, it's always related to things like kind of difficult, awkward. And the 11th house is the house of groups and associations. And our association with this sort of club, that's the EU, is awkward. It's difficult for us. It's not something that the UK has slotted into. We're one of the most sort of obstinate countries. We're always the one kicking up our heels in Europe. And the moon is kind of aggravating that Saturn, which causes us to have this kind of reticence about joining with others and releasing our identity. Saturn really wants to hold on to identity, to something conservative, to what is traditional in the past. Whereas the 11th house is all about letting go and getting involved in something bigger than yourself. So the fact that Saturn's activated says all we need to know really about what this Brexit is all about. It's about taking back control, not being part of something where you surrender your identity. So as you see there are some powerful indicators in this chart. And in any chart, it's quite unusual because if you think of your own personal chart, you'll go through many years where you might not have as many as there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 indicators like this. It's quite unusual to get such powerful and such numerous indicators. So that's all saying to me, this is important, this matters, this is a turning point in our history. And definitely it's lots of things there, symbolic of change. But there is another partner to this kind of divorce, if you like, and that's the European Union. They also have a chart. Their birthday is the 1st of November 1993 in Brussels, and that was the time the Maastricht Treaty came into effect. So that's kind of the time that they've judged the birth date of the EU. Now, a lot of people will poo-poo astrology, say, it's a lot of nonsense. And, sure, have your doubts, but when I look at the chart of the EU, I'm thinking to myself, someone high up in the EU believes in astrology and has chosen this date. Because there's absolutely everything they want the EU to be is in this chart. It's got a huge amount of, well, when I say a huge amount, it's got the Sun, Mercury, Mars and Pluto in Scorpio in the 4th house. It's got Leo rising, Moon in Taurus. Those now are all the fixed signs. This is a solid, very solid chart. We would say in South Africa, gebou om te hou, in other words, built to last. And there's no doubt that this organisation is gebou om te hou. All these planets in Scorpio indicate to me that it's going to hang on in there despite the toughest times, and it aims to stick around and be a powerful world force. The Leo ascendant says to me, this is a very ambitious political bloc. And I think really the ambition is underestimated by what we're thinking. I think the EU has designs on being a global power, for the euro to overtake the dollar. This organisation thinks big. They are stubborn. Moon in Taurus. They're not going anywhere. They're going to stick around. Very financially savvy. They've got everything very tightly planned. I often look at the EU and you look at the news about the migrant crisis and the various things going on, and I tend to think, gee, this EU is a mess. They don't know what is going on. They have not really got a plan. But then I look at this chart and I think, no, I'm actually wrong. I think there's method in their madness. I think there's a very, very powerful underlying plan within this whole European project. All these Scorpio planets, it's highly methodical. It's very well planned. But the fact that these planets are in the 4th house says to me as well, very secretive, not transparent, not looking to be particularly accountable. And it also says that the EU is quite protectionist. It's not really as outward looking as they would like us to think, and it's quite inflexible. It's very resistant to kind of change and to reform, which is what a lot of people would like to see. I think it's kind of got its plan, and it's a case of our way or the highway. Now, the fact that both Venus and Jupiter are in Libra indicates to me that there were some very laudable aims of the EU, lots of justice, fairness, equality. They really were trying to achieve those aims. But I feel that the kind of controlling element, because Taurus, Scorpio, it's quite controlling signs, and I think that has almost become the focus of it, the bureaucratic side, the controlling side, and some of these lofty ideals that we see here represented by Venus and Jupiter be kind of lost. There is something quite interesting going on there, which is the Neptune and Uranus conjunction. And that says to me a lot about scientific development. I think the EU are heavily involved in projects going on at CERN in Switzerland. I think they are very focused on scientific development and in world leadership via science. So I do think that that's something to watch out for, and that is the way that Europe are looking to become a world power, a dominant world force, is through the use of science. So what does it say about Brexit? Well, the EU is 23 years old, and if you look here at the Icarus Cooley, which is exactly opposite the midheaven, if you move it along 23 degrees, what planet does it happen to bump into but Pluto? So Pluto hitting the foundations of the EU says to me it is about to be hit by a crisis. Now, we already know the migrant crisis and the Syrian problem, the Libyan problem. It is already a problem for the EU, and they don't seem to be dealing with it particularly efficiently. That could be the crisis. there could be more economic problems stemming from Greece and youth unemployment, but it also says to me something's going to be shaking this organisation up pretty soon this year, and I think that could definitely be another indicator that we're heading towards Brexit. Pluto is also active in transits. It'll be affecting this little conjunction here of Neptune and Uranus. Now that symbolises to me more about the migrant crisis than it necessarily does about Brexit. But again, the fact that Pluto is so active at a major point in the chart leads me to think that the EU is going to be struggling to come to terms with a new identity, with a new format, and with kind of a new, it might even, the UK either having this referendum or pushing for Brexit might force the EU to reconsider some of its goals and to maybe become more accountable, more flexible, or change its direction slightly. But again, looking at this chart, I'm thinking and getting a feeling of change, and of quite radical change, because Pluto is coming. So, overall, these are exciting times. We live in very, very exciting times in Europe. Anything could happen. I feel that the results of the referendum will either be a vote out, or the vote will be so close that the people who are clamouring for out are only going to feel emboldened and stronger, and their voice is going to get louder. So what I don't think is that this vote will be the end of it. Yes, if we vote out, that'll be the beginning of renegotiations and a turmoil time for this country, as represented by Pluto on the ascendant, and the birth of something new. As I say, it's a long labour rather than a caesarean, and it's quick. But if the vote does go the other way, I think the margin is going to be so slim that the rancour for out will get stronger and stronger, and it won't be the clear-cut, okay, that's all done and dusted, now we move on and forget about it, that the government want. Pluto's going to be hanging around a lot more, so get ready for change. I remember years ago, a friend of mine was going through a tough time in her marriage, and she wrote to me one day and she said, okay, I sat down with my husband and we had a talk last night and we said, is this working? Should we separate? And she said to me afterwards, once you've had that conversation, there's no going back. And I think that's what it is with Brexit. We are having the conversation. There isn't going to be a going back. This is the beginning, not the end of it. If we vote, even if we vote in, it's not the end of it. It's the beginning, not the end, of something new for the United Kingdom. Something that is going to be quite exciting and quite tumultuous. To end off, when I think of the chart here of the EU, I'm thinking that there's a lot of Scorpio. And what is the symbol of Scorpio? The phoenix that rises from the ashes of its own destruction. So, you just think about that.